All right, so now we're going to talk about the Disturbance microsolver, which is one of my personal favorites. Let's see, Disturbance. So there's this CL1. You'll see that come up a lot. Anytime you see CL, that basically refers to graphics card stuff. You can do things like volumes simulations are good for doing parallel operations on the graphics card. And you'll even see that the whole pyrosolver can be run in with OpenCL. It can be faster, especially if you have a fast graphics card, although you do lose the ability to do certain things, and it will look a little bit different than the normal way. We're just going to stick to the vanilla version for this tutorial. Any case, so gas disturbance, there it is. We'll connect it to the velocity update right in the middle there. What does gas disturbance do? Basically, gas disturbance takes the existing velocity vector and then modifies it in some sort of way. It applies some sort of noise in a block size, in an area, like an element size of this. So, for example, 0.3. So it's going to take a 0.3 size area of your simulation. And to visualize it, I'm literally going to make a block that looks like 0.3. And it's going to mess up those velocities a little bit. It's going to perturb them. And actually, that reminds me, so the disturbed field by default is actually temperature, meaning it's going to modify the temperature field. We want it to do velocity. And if you do change the velocity, make sure you click this. Disturbed field is a vector field. That way it knows how to mess up the field. Otherwise, if it's a scalar, it's going to do it one way. If it's a vector, it's going to do it another way. Threshold field here, it says density. What that's referring to is this cutoff here. Cutoff is basically saying don't bother doing anything if there's not even 0.1 density in there. So it's only going to act on voxels that have less than 0.1 density, and then the rest it's going to ignore, which will allow it to run faster. And also, it's often usually what you want. When you're trying to break up, what we're trying to do with the disturb multi-solvers is to get rid of these kind of these hard mushroom edges. They look very amateurish. Again, it's not that it's wrong. It's just that we don't usually have a situation in the real life where the air is completely still and there's this rushing velocity coming at it. What we want to do is break up the air kind of along that leading edge. And also, while we're here, let's change our simulation around a little bit. I'm just gonna have it emit for maybe the first 6 frames, and then just die down in terms of what's being added to it by frame 12, just so we don't have to wait through long simulations. And similarly, we'll have our disturbance match that. The 0.75 here is the power of it. So I'm going to have that kind of match. In fact, I'll probably have it even go a little bit longer. Maybe we'll have it go to frame 10 at 0.75. Actually, let's even start with 0.5. And then we'll have it die down until like here. So to reiterate, disturbance is going to look at the density, and as long as it's less than 0.1, which should be like some sort of leading edge, it'll perturb it in this big block size pattern. So here we go. Let's press play. And we should see it not have nearly as much of that smooth edge anymore. And as you can see, that's what we're getting. It's breaking up the that mushroom thing. I still see the mushroom somewhat, but it's definitely a lot less clean than it was when this was off, where this was just pure smooth, which is never something that we want. Yeah, see, that's that super, super, super lame looking. Now, here's a super, super pro tip, actually. Speaking of super, super, is you might remember me ranting against these shape things here. I mean, disturbance is here. It has a default to 0.5. It's got a cutoff and everything else. And actually, this one just defaults to velocity, which is a good call. But the thing is that you only get one. What we're actually going to want to do here is have 2, maybe even 3 The reason why is because we want it to work at different sizes. If this big one is working at the 0.3 size, these ones should maybe be working at smaller levels, just so we can get different size detail. We want a big breakup, medium size breakup, and small breakup. I tend to divide this number by 3. I don't really know why I started doing that. You'd think that like in a computer sciencey way, you'd be dividing it by like 2 or maybe even 10. I don't know. I find that when I make these boxes and I look at them, you know, because again, it is literally going to be this size. So there's the 0.1, and here's the 0.03. These are the size details, and that 0.03 may seem ridiculous here, but you got to remember, when it's full screen HD image, you can really see that. I mean, hell, especially if it's on a movie screen, you can definitely see that size. So I tend to do 3 sizes. It will, of course, as usual, depend on what you're trying to do, but I'd say typically 3 layers is good. So 0.3, 0.1, and 0.03. Cool. So now when we run it, we should see even more breakup along that leading edge. So you can see the big feature, you can see some of the sub features, and if we actually had more resolution in the simulation, you'd see it get even better. And actually, while you weren't looking between chapters, I changed the division size to 0.05 from 1. So this will, of course, simulate much faster, but at 0.1, I mean, we won't even see, we'll barely see the disturbance happening at 0.1, and we definitely won't see anything happening from the 0.3 pre-1. But 0.05 seems to be doable. Certainly not too many voxels. Yeah, pretty small still. Yeah, so 3 of these guys. We've got the cutoff is important. There's also this idea of control fields where you can say, you know what, I need to modify what's doing even more. You could say something like, look at the density, and if the density is 1, let's say, you know, which is, this range corresponds to this ramp. So 0 is on the left, 1's on the right. What this is saying is, if there's a full amount of density in there, then apply this disturbance field at its maximum. You might even do the opposite. You might say, well, if there's barely any density in there at all, you know, if it gets close to 0, that's when I want to have it apply most of all. You might even change this to refer to our cutoff, because remember, it's never even going to do anything if it's above the cutoff anyway. So now it's going to really apply this disturbance where there's less stuff. And again, the reason why we tend to apply it over there is because that's what tends to be the edges, is where it's approaching 0. You could certainly play around with that. You could give it maybe a bell curve in the middle. Maybe you don't want to exactly touch the side of it. You could do the opposite, of course. You could have it but have maybe disturbance bubble up from the inside of it only, and then you'd have to raise that cutoff field. For our purposes, I'm not going to use the control field. I don't want to add more variables, and even in production, I don't want to add more variables into it than there really needs to be in the first place. If I'm getting the look that I want without that, then, you know, less opportunities for human error. So in any case, so we're sourcing everything in for the first 6 frames. It tapers out. The drag takes over. In fact, I meant to change the drag too. Let's make it 1. Let's just bring it all the way in, and that should bring it to a stop after some frames there. So yeah, so it's looking nice. You can see all of this nice detail, and especially once we up-res this, once we do our overnight set it and forget it simulation, you'll the simulate, it might take 5 minutes of frame to simulate, but you don't care. You'll be asleep, and you'll come back to really, really nice detail in your sim, and that is what makes for a good dailies the next day. Let's see. I should have closed that window before, and let's bring it back again. There it goes. So we have an initial burst, maybe like some sort of, I don't know, like a anti-aircraft fire, like you see the old school ones. I don't know if they still use that or not. But in any case, boosh, it's got an initial burst, it slows down, the drag takes over, and we're left with that detail. So, because no matter how much specific detail we have from the incoming velocity that we're sourcing, it's going to blur and spread out and slow down from the drag as it travels out. So these disturb things, while not particularly physically accurate, they do nonetheless get us much closer to how you would observe this phenomenon. And again, that's often because of currents in the air or even debris traveling through the air and breaking it up before your smoke gets there. So here you can go. You can really start to get a sense of the disturbance and how it's applying those shapes in here. And it's getting cooled off by the drag and also by the lack of velocity being added into the system because we had it become keyed off. Cool. So there you have it. So that's the Disturbance microsolver. Again, I like to do 3 levels at least. You just plop down a merge. Any amount of other microsolvers that we put in here, whether it's turbulence or dissipation, you can throw them all into the same merge. It doesn't really matter. Just again, stay away from these ones because if you are just like, oh, I only get one disturbance, well then you'll never get like really nice looking stuff. I also wonder what this looks like from other angles. I don't really like that angle, I don't think. Oh yeah, doesn't it look nicer? Guess we just got unlucky with where our camera was pointing. But yeah, you can see all kinds of cool stuff going on in there. Great, so that is Disturbance.